This is Oye Dimelo Club, and today we are going to be talking about both of the Dracula movies made in 1931. And today, talking with me, we have JP Saruno, and El Dondino, Chris, and Steve. So, hitting things right off, I want to ask, what were your first impressions? And if you have seen, is this the first time you've watched both films or just one or the other? Let me know.
Okay.
I guess I'll go. I was thinking when I was watching this because I knew there was a Spanish version of Dracula that was filmed at the same time as the American version of Dracula, but they had all Spanish actors doing it, and I couldn't remember if when I was a kid if I watched it. It's one of those like, did I watch the Bela Lugosi dubbed version or did I watch the actual Spanish Dracula? So I can't remember, but I know I saw a lot of the monster movies in Spanish when I was in Paraguay. That being said, for me, the interesting thing was that there are certain characters that I preferred in Dracula, and there's certain characters that I preferred in Dracula. I don't know if you can tell the difference, but for instance, the Reginald. It's not Reginald. Shit, I can't think of his name.
Renfield.
Renfield. So like the preppy pre going crazy Renfield, I prefer the American version. But the crazy out of his mind Renfield, I prefer the Spanish version. So there were things like that I just thought interesting, that like the certain, and I think maybe the more over the top stuff, I enjoyed the Spanish version than the American version. I thought that was probably also, I mean, the Spanish one is 30 minutes longer than the American one, so it's a lot of extra dialogue that doesn't really push it, but I'm sure we might get into it. They filmed the Spanish one at night, and they during the day they were filming the American version. That's why for like the Spanish one, there's really no exterior shots, no like day scenes, whereas in the American one, you can see them kind of like outside the manor and stuff like that, outside the estate. So I think maybe that's why they decided to just talk a whole bunch more, because they were like, well, we can't shoot outside, so we'll just have like exposition city going on. But yeah, so that's kind of my takeaway. I would love to hear later. I think Michaela was talking about how the Spanish version one is considered to be uh, better. If I'm not mistaken, that's what Michaela had said. So I'd love to hear her talk about that later. But that's all for me right now.
All right. Chris, Steve?
Yes. So for me, I had never seen either. I've seen like scenes from them, well, definitely from the Bela Lugosi one. For me, I'm really glad that I watched the Spanish version first because I think Bela Lugosi did it differently, and also I really enjoyed his character more. He just seemed more sinister and more scary to me, and I liked it that way. But there are definitely things in the Spanish version that I liked better, specific scenes and how they handled it. And I wonder now, like, if it was filmed in the same day, if they got to see the dailies of the English version before they did the Spanish. I would imagine. I don't know if that was, maybe it wasn't available at the time. It'd also be interesting to find out how much money they spent budget wise on the acting. Because I did feel like there was some superior acting in one of the versions. So for me, I did really enjoy both of them. I am glad the order I watched them in because it did kind of lead into Bela Lugosi, and I honestly feel like Bela Lugosi was the better Dracula for me. So I enjoyed that part of it.
Estás loco.
All right, Steve. You.
Alrighty, so I personally didn't watch the Bela Lugosi one. I watched only the Spanish Dracula one. I was planning to watch both, but unfortunately, because of travels, I wasn't able to. But one thing for sure. So this is one thing that I have to say before saying anything. I've never, ever, ever watched like a legit Dracula film or narrative for a long time. I feel like I'm familiar with the character, kind of like from like Beetlejuice like live show back in the day when they
Mhm.
all used to do karaoke or something. And then like, and then folklore, people talking about Dracula. But I never really got into the story. Like I never really understood like the base of Dracula, and like I didn't even know he had more powers than just like pretty much I'm gonna suck your blood type thing. Like I didn't know
Mhm.
he would like turn people into stuff. I didn't realize basically Darth Vader's powers essentially came from Dracula in a way. We can
Mhm.
argue about that, but I feel like it. And the one thing that like there were some things about this movie that like took me away from the movie, and there were many things that took me into the movie. For example, what intrigued me was that like I didn't realize it was like this little town, and they're just like based on the evidence they're getting, they're like trying to figure out where is this coming from and all this stuff. And then I hear this guy that's kind of like I've heard the name before. Maybe there was like an old movie, like an old action movie that I heard from the past called Van Helsing or whatever, and that
Mhm.
dude ended up being like the the antithesis or the guy like trying to like get rid of it. But the one thing that really got me out of this movie that I was just like, oh my god, this is so cringe and so bad. It was just the takes. So like they will have like a take that like the person is doing like a take on the character, like becoming this thing or doing this thing, and then they would just cut to like a close-up shot that literally looks like they're in like a completely different set, and the person's taking a completely different choice acting wise than the one previous that I just watched. And it happened multiple times. It happened mainly with Dracula, with like how he was looking at
Mhm.
people and stuff. It happened once with the other guy that was going crazy, going like maestro. That guy only happened once, like when he was like crawling on the floor or something like that. But besides that, like I really enjoyed this movie, and it felt to me for some reason many times like it was dubbed, but it was literally in Spanish. So it just felt like look at Dina.
JP.
JP.
That's exactly what it
um,
looked like.
so I'm glad you brought that up. Are you done, Steve?
No, yeah, I'm done. Go ahead.
The I did notice between the two movies, the Spanish one also might be 30 minutes longer just of all the freaking close-ups they had. Because I did notice that, but it almost became endearing to me because they just look so much crazier than I guess the American version because nothing says crazy like just like extreme close up and like and their eyes would just kind of
Right.
and it's almost like no one told him like cut or like no one told him like action right like it's just like I guess need direction anyway.
All right, JP.
Oh man, it's like it was really hard to understand the fuck it. I was trying to do a Bela Lugosi accent joke, but I couldn't. I'm too lazy. I couldn't find the through line for it. Anywho, it's kind of like it's kind of like with Mexican Coke and regular Coke. Like one is obviously kind of better, but like, do you really want to like spend 40 extra minutes on like a story? I'll admit though, while comparing the two, pacing wise, I think the American one does it better. But when it comes to narrative and like, if you're gonna talk about cinema as an art, the Spanish one they took advantage of like actually using the camera
Mm-hmm.
and like knowing like what they wanted with their shots. It was much more ambitious, which is crazy because like Dino said, like they had to shoot at night because they had the English folks had the priority to make their film. But with it's kind of like in movie making and whatnot. Like if you give people less, then they'll make more out of that. And you could totally tell in the Spanish Dracula movie. And there's a lot of holes and like narrative stuff that they actually go back to in the Spanish one that the English one like either completely forgot or they didn't even bring up. I'm willing to bet that there's a cut of the original English Dracula out there that's closer to the Spanish one. And if not, like they decided, some of this is not worth telling, but like the Spanish one, no, they fully committed to the script and the story. So I'll admit, like, I think the Spanish one, story-wise, is better. I do have a few nitpicks, like performance stuff, but to be honest, like if you want to watch the better story, it'll be the Spanish one. Even though at times I got frustrated because I did feel like they were taking too long on certain shots and too long on certain scenes. But I think we'll talk about it later in the roundtable. So that's my first impression.
All right. Well, I am a huge movie monster fan, and that's why I chose this film because I never had the opportunity to see the Spanish one before. And Bela Lugosi is like one of my favorite actors of all time. And what was interesting is like honestly, there were some performances that I thought were just so much better in the Spanish one than there was in the American one, and vice versa. Like if I could have had Bela Lugosi's Dracula and the girl who played Mina.
It's in the English one, but it's Ava in the Spanish one.
Ava in the women in the Spanish one, it would have been just so mind blowing, And I also think it's very interesting how they interpreted like the same shot but completely different, which is why I think this is like such an exciting talk because like when else do you like? There's so few examples of like someone having like the same bones to the same material and like fleshing it out completely different, And like I'm so glad I got to see both and compare them side to side.
I'm glad you brought that up because it really is like how many other times did that happen? Like clearly just the mentality of it. The only thing I can think of is that maybe they were thinking like dubbing wasn't really doable or just they got like Mexican stars of the day and they thought that would sell better than just dubbing it. Like that whole mindset to me just seems so like now you see like Stranger Things, like all these things on Netflix, automatically it's like 10, 12 different languages that you can pick from. But like to be kind of like, okay, like team one, team B kind of thing, like, all right, we're done. Now you guys can come in and wear the sweaty ass costumes.
Well, and like that's another thing is like the costumes were done differently slightly too, which we can get into that later. But like I also think it was because this was like 1931 when this was made, so like the idea of having sound in a movie was still being very being developed. So I think at this point, no one knew you could dub something.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So like, could you imagine how the cinema verse would look nowadays if that practice had been maintained? You know, could you imagine like what that would look like?
Los Avengers.
I was gonna say there will be 101 Avenger movies. Man, I don't got time for any of them.
Chris?
I think.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think I've never seen a movie done like that before, like two times. But I believe there's a version of Psycho where they did it shot by shot, and it was like Vince Vaughn or somebody was in it, like a newer version of the movie Psycho. Did you guys ever see that or hear of that?
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, I feel like Hitchcock redid his own movies as well. So like there was
one.
He
like
definitely
Diabolique or something like that. There's definitely one that he redid. I think you're right.
No, it's more than one. Because some he redid from black and white to color, and so some maybe they changed the name of the movie as well, but definitely he redid some of his movies, but that was mainly going from black and white to color the majority of the time.
Also, it's just like what I think is very interesting is the fact that it's two completely different casts, two completely different directors, you know, and you do feel like they're different influences. Just like JP was explaining earlier, how they made use of camera angles. Like, I think how the American dealt with the close-ups of Bela Lugosi was a little bit more innovative, but I also think that the way that they showed the Spanish Dracula coming out of his casket was a lot more interesting.
Yes.
You know, so it's like interesting how like those little details like really do make them feel like two very different pieces.
That was the first thing I noticed was like, you know, because I saw the Spanish one first also, and then Bela Lugosi. I'm like, that's such a lame entrance. or like getting out of the casket, right? Or exit from the casket. I was just like, ugh, bring me the Mexican
Wait,
Dracula.
since I didn't watch the Bela Lugosi, did it also have like those cheesy insects, like the spider or the little bat flying by the string?
You know what I found out was insane, and I think this is kind of fucked up. So in the Spanish and the English versions, the insert shots, they don't use the same insert shots. So they they have those same shots that you talked about, Des, but the Spanish version, they were only allowed to use takes that the English version did not. It's like, you guys are making the same movie, just use the same insert shot.
Wait,
like,
not a bit? That's for real, JP?
That's for real. Like, they were not allowed to, they were, for the insert shots, they were only allowed to use whatever takes that the English version did not use. So like, that's fucked. Like, that's not okay.
That is so bizarre. Because I did notice that it wasn't the same bat, it wasn't the same spider. One was a spider, the other one was araña, and
cockroach.
Clearly the spider had definitely a better budget.
Dude, how about the puff of smoke that comes out of the casket in the Spanish version? The guy was smoking a bong in there, man. It was like he was hot boxing his coffin. Every time he came out, I was like, this dude's gonna be so baked.
The backlighting of the casket and the fog every time for their kudos for that, because they're like, okay, we have less, but and so all that, I thought the Mexican version, well, Spanish, I mean, I would imagine they're all Mexican actors, but probably there could be some other Spaniards or something. But it was like real quick and dirty compared to the American one. So that the inserts, everything like that, like even the close-ups, like that's what it could be like at a different location. Like, all right, we filmed what we could at night. It's like, take one and we're good. Print it, cut it, can it, boom. And then it's like, oh, we need some close-up. All right, just come into the office. And we'll film your face for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Dude, what was the thing that you guys felt between the two movies that bothered you the most that was different? Because I have one. There's a scene that bothers me. Does anybody have one?
There's a few, and I know why it bothered me, because I'm willing to bet that they had the same script, right? But the English one decided not to do a lot of actions in the script. Like when Reinfeld meets up with Dracula for the first time, and he's situated in his bedroom, and it's before he shows the paperwork, Dracula says, "Sit down, eat." I think both of them literally say that. But only in the Spanish one is there food there, and he's eating food to kill time, so he cuts himself through a knife and not a paper cut. What kind of lame? Also, as dorky as it is in the Spanish one, at least there's fog at the window. In the English one, they're like, no, fuck the fog. We don't have that. We'll say that there's a fog, but fuck the fog. We're not gonna do it. In the Spanish one, the fog is magically only present by the window. But at least there's a fog.
The fog sticks
So-
at it. Yes.
I'm glad you brought the meal, because that's also like the second thing I noticed was just like, not only was there food in the Spanish one, it was a full-on turkey. It was like a turkey, and Dracula was like, whoo. He just kept like pouring the wine that was like all dusty and all that, just like, keep going, like
And
just
it's
like,
great because it's like you're plumping the fucking chicken in front of you.
yeah, and he's like, I
In
mean,
them.
in Spanish, but he goes, I don't drink wine.
Gin.
Yeah, no.
Chris, what's your thing that you...
Dude, the scene where he kills Renfield in the Spanish version, he just heaves him off the steps sideways and he goes flying. And the other one, he rolls down the steps. I was like, no, they ruined it. Like throwing him off the side was so much cooler because the shot was so far away. That shit would have hurt.
Also,
So-
they
Good.
they added that Looney Tunes like thud at the bottom. Ah!
That was it. He kind of fell off the side at the end.
So, since JP said that they were the inserts and all that, they were only able to use what the American version didn't use, is that something like, oh no, we throw Renfield down the stairs, you can't kill him that way? And they're like, I guess there's no banisters, so let's just throw him off, and maybe that's why they did that, and it is a better shot than just like down the
No.
stairs, or...
No way. They
I-
planned this.
I think the Spanish guys were brave and they were like, we're gonna make this asshole a monster and we're gonna make our women sexy.
Yes.
They were hot in the
Yeah.
Spanish one.
Definitely.
I agree. Like, honestly, the women, the way they're dressed, there's so much more subtle sex appeal compared to like how they dressed the women in the American one. And I also
That's-
believe that they were friends.
Yeah, in the English one they're like too sassy and too like put offish and prude. But in the Spanish one, like, like they're girlfriends, they're chilling. And then you do feel bad that one of them ends up getting fucking murked to death by necking, you know?
Yeah. I also, the John and Jose, like John is like the rare,
John and Juan.
John and Juan.
Yeah.
Like Juan, bless his heart, he had all the charm of a fresh rutabaga compared to the American one. Like if I could have switched them, it would have been so. Like I can't believe that man was actually interested in that woman.
Well, same thing with the nurse, right? The male nurse. I feel like the Spanish one, even though all I can think of when it's those kind of outfits, I just think of like Chespirito and like just, the wearing the outfits or the, the costume. He looks like a milkman. I guess everyone looked like a milkman back in the day, but they all had like different jobs.
It was like Don Knotts.
Yeah.
Yeah. That guy, Martin in the Spanish one, his name was Martin. I don't know what he was in a whole different movie, but I loved him.
I thought he quit, and then he's still there.
Right? I think his acting choice was, I'm gonna do the Three Stooges, and he couldn't decide which one. I really liked his character. He knew how to, and he also really played very well with the nurse.
Mhm.
The other one, it was too straight. I need some fun in this movie, But
Yeah.
like Martin, good on you, Orkin man. I loved you.
For the Maytag guy, right?
Or that's who I was thinking of when we saw it. Maytag. Oh my god.
The one where now the commercial is of the dishwasher, I think, and they hand the chocolate cake, and he's just like, and it's clean. It's a freaking hat, whatever the kind of captain's hat. The shipwreck, all of that is just bananas. How it's different, and maybe that's also what the direction was like. The Spanish Renfield just crazy from the get-go, and they're like, We don't have a boom. You just gotta scream.
I also really liked the shipwreck scene, because that was another scene where they decided not to pull any bullshit. Like, no, these men died from fear and petrified. They weren't tied to the ship, even though historically speaking, that would have been the more accurate thing, being tied to the ship during a storm.
Mm-hmm.
But like, the only Dracula movie that I've seen in the past is Nosferatu, and that scene was very much an homage to that movie, because they do have that ship scene in Nosferatu, and like, I was like, it's such a missed opportunity in the English one. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that long of a scene. It's like just 3 extra minutes, and it sets it up so well. Like Dracula is not a guy to be fucking messed with,
Right.
And it's such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, no, definitely. I also felt that way about The Fly. That in the Spanish one. That was so creepy. Like, where he's like so distracted and he's following it and he catches it. Like,
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When he started doing that, I was like, "What is he doing? What?"
And then he just kind of like, oh, never mind, plays it out.
No, and I like. There was an actual bug there too.
there was. Like, he actually caught a fly.
Like, it wasn't make believe. It was like, no, there was an actual bug right there.
It
I
makes
got
me. Have you guys seen the Mel Brooks Dracula Dead and Loving It?
Mm-hmm. With Leslie Nielsen.
No.
Long
Yeah,
time
Leslie
ago.
Nielsen. It's funny seeing these two now because clearly it seems like they tried doing the Dracula Dead and Loving It and trying to get the lightning in the bottle that they did with Young Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm thinking, like, I wonder if they played it a little more subtle, and if they did that one in black and white, if it would have just been on the same level of um, of the Young Frankenstein one. Because I remember I did study it. I did outdoor theater, and I played John. And in rehearsals, at some point, the line is like, Lucy, like I'm knocking on the door, and I'm like, basically, it just became, Lucy, I'm home. And after that, in like a really bad British, accent. And after that, we just couldn't. And there was a Mexican guy who was playing the butler, and then he was going in and out of the British also to the Mexican, and he'd be like, I thought the bat. What is it? I saw the bat in the window. So
I would pay to see this.
yeah, it became kind of like a cult following because it was every year for Halloween outdoor in Ohio. So like October in Ohio outdoors can be really freaking cold. And yeah, go check it out. New Philadelphia, Ohio, Dracula. Probably just missed it, but I think they're still doing it. Yeah. So anyway, I was thinking the different versions: the Bela Lugosi, the Mexican one, and then the Mel Brooks one. That it almost seems like they were doing scene by scene. Like just it feels like that improv game also where you read. Well, it's also an acting exercise where it's like you do the scene, okay, now do the scene again, but do a different choice or do different line, right? Or new choice. Um, yeah. So I'd also recommend go see Dracula Dead and Loving It because you get a kick out of it. It's not the same as Young Frankenstein, but.
Well, and like I think that's also why this kind of thing is so fun, because you don't have so many opportunities to see material that was literally made side by side. Because like I feel like the studios could have so easily been like, no, these are these shots that you have to imitate, and this is like they could have easily done that. They could have made them try to follow the other one shot for shot, but they gave them so much freedom.
That, or they had no oversight and they just went ham.
Actually, I kind of like that theory better.
Wait, would that have maybe? I'm thinking like 1931 or whatever, but I'm like, would that have been like a equity or a union thing or a director thing? Like, if you're gonna reuse what I used, you gotta pay me again. That's the only thing I can think of.
Probably what it
But
was, actually.
but then the
Why else would they make such a big deal about the intakes?
right, but it would have been. It's the same studio that did it, right? That did both of them. But
Mhm.
I didn't think. I thought the studios during that golden age, if you will, or one of the golden ages of cinema, they basically owned and controlled everything. So I don't think they would have cared if they just like it would be cheaper for them to just be like, here's the insert, here's the insert, film around it, have fun, and yeah.
Now that I think about it, maybe because it was not that easy to duplicate film. I didn't think about that. Everything was done so physically back then. So maybe that's why it's like
There was definitely one scene in the Mexican one that I noted, like early on in Dracula's castle, before they moved to the estates, where like it's the grainiest, like some whatever can they need to go and like redo 4K, find any print they can, because it's like okay, it's black and white, it's a little vintage, vignette kind of around the edges, but then one of the like long shots, wide shots of like the staircase or whatever is just like super messy, grainy, uh, right? I mean, we all saw that version. Everything else seemed like, okay, this is everything fits, but it must have been like someone cut out part of that, like that whole scene, and then when it was time to put it back together, they're like, oh crap,
it
we
was
left this on the ground.
from
Right.
what I read, it was a lost part of the film that was just recently. When I say recently, I mean decades found. So,
1945.
In like Cuba or something. They found it like
yes,
in a, like they found it. I read that too. There was a couple. They found like multiple versions in different countries, and only one of them was this much together.
Oh wow.
and that was unfortunately the condition that part of the sequence was.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think another thing that was interesting to me was the death of Dracula. That was off screen, basically. Like most of the death was that in both versions.
It was off screen in both versions, but I feel like in the Mexican one, the Spanish one, it made more sense. Because in the English one, it kind of makes it seem like Dracula just gave up.
Yeah,
but like in the Spanish one, you see that it's not because of that. He ran out of time.
Yeah.
Like he sees the day's coming, and that's why Lucia is not in the casket, because he was trying to get her into the casket and it was too late. So I don't know why they didn't do that shot either in the English one, because it looks bad. They rushed it.
Yeah, no.
They had 30 more minutes they could have used just for the death scene, the Mexican one.
Yes.
Well, okay, my question. Sorry, or in both. The lady vampires that are at the beginning, they don't go overseas. What's up with that? ¿Qué pasa? What did you say?
Get that up. It would have been too suspicious. Too suspicious.
I can't hear you guys. What?
Oh, I said, you know how much that would cost? Because not only would they have to bring them over, but like they would have to bring over the fucking soil from Transylvania.
Yeah, so I guess now they reboot everything. Let's have a reboot of Netflix with the Spanish lady vampires of what happens to them back in Transylvania since they're left behind. Do they,
I would have.
The American ones were too.
I feel bad because like the harem was not utilized to their full potential.
Well, I mean, this was during a day where like sex was evil, so
right.
Well, is that what turned Renfield crazy? Because the three ladies of the night, literally of the night, messed around with him, and then he's like, "I had three ladies in one night." Ah!
100% what I thought.
I like how the English one though, as soon as they're about to like get him, Bela Lugosi's like, back the fuck away. Like, this one's mine.
No, that one's more kind of like accurate to what happened in the book.
Okay.
Because like in the book, Renfield sees these three monstrous women, and then Dracula has to kind of be like, "Get away! This is my snack. I made you. I made you, and I can unmake you so easily." Which is also
he needed him as the servant and not as another vampire.
Also, can I ask, in the Spanish version, how does Van Helsing be the only person that doesn't get caught up on Dracula's spell?
Oh, I don't know, dude. In the English one, this is one of the only things I actually did not like about the Spanish and the English one.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Spanish one, it's Helsing trying to convince everyone that Dracula's a vampire. But like in the English one, Helsing and John, they both see that Dracula has no, reflection. So it takes a lot less time to convince the whole gang, hey, something's up here, So, but I don't like.
By the way, Steve, the Van Helsing movie you're thinking of, it's Wolverine Van Helsing.
Hugh Jackman, yeah.
Hugh Jackman yeah.
That's what I thought when I watched the movie. I was expecting like a young guy who was like badass. Meanwhile, there's like this old man having a hard time like tacking in the hammer. And dude, what about the piece of wood?
Cigarette box has a mirror, and he's like.
In one of the movies, it was like a piece of a pallet that was like wide that he was driving through the guy's heart. I was like, shit, that would hurt, man. That shit was like this wide, like.
Well, there's dead, and then there's dead. We had to make sure.
Yeah.
Which one was it, the English or the Spanish one, where he literally had to destroy the top of the casket in order to do it?
The Spanish one.
Yeah.
Okay. The American one, like
they just
like find it. It's the same piece of wood.
I got thrown off in the Spanish one because when they're in that room, the doctors and scientists, and they're trying to figure out what happened, or when they're coming up with like the whole Dracula idea or something like that, there's a really old guy, and I thought that guy was going to be Van Helsing because he's got like almost kind of like in Batman Begins, where you think Raja Ghul, whatever the guy's name is, like he's trained by the goatee guy, and it's like, oh, this is the master, and then it ended up being Liam Neeson. Yeah. And I felt like I got that swept off the rug because I was like, oh, it's gonna be this old guy that's like, because that's what I've always thought of Van Helsing. He knows, like he has studied, he has already met him like in Transylvania, but no, it was the slightly not old guy. And also, they're like, I don't know which version it was, but they're like, oh yeah, we know Transylvania is like, there's a Dracula. And it's like, wait, how does everyone in Transylvania know, and people outside of Transylvania know that Transylvania knows that there's Dracula and is some sort of vampire, but then is able to make it overseas without any issues? I was very confused or perplexed by that kind of thing of like, who knows what's going on in Transylvania?
I think that was the Spanish one. It was just that added exposition where it's like, you know what? Who cares?
Yeah, but the whole point is like, even if it wasn't vampires, like clearly they know people are dying and people are killing them and they got holes in their neck. Like, it's not like they're making this shit up. And dude, best scene in the movie, I forgot, is the first scene. When they're flying around the back of the cart. Dude, there was no more violent scene in a carriage in both movies. They're flying around that fucking... It was amazing.
More in the Spanish one. And super loud. I saw it with Jason, and I was like, I was actually like, I gotta read the subtitle, because I cannot hear them. Because the wagon is so freaking loud. And I'm just like...
It must have been like people shaking it from the side, like the actual what was going on. That must have been awesome.
And in the Spanish one, they decide to show it again when he's riding to the castle, where it's like, oh, we're gonna same thing.
You can see on the bat, the wires on the bat as it's flying in front of the. It was
Yeah,
sweet,
way
man. I
more in
thought it
the
was great.
Spanish
I
one
really
than
liked it.
It was
than
a
the
really cool
American
shot
one.
too, because like they actually did that one in the dark compared to the American one, so
Mhm.
like you actually get this creepy effect.
No, so that was the part when like Dracula shows up. I get up in the stairs in the Spanish version, of course, that's the one I saw. Uh it was like, oh, that's creepy. But then when he started like talking and like catering to the dude, I was like, oh, he's a lovely host. Like he's just like he's just a great guy that's alone by himself. And then they started doing like those zoom shots, and those zoom shots he looked creepy. But I was like, that's not the face he's making right now.
No.
It doesn't
Well,
match.
oh, so speaking of not doing the same inserts, or I guess being slightly different, in the Spanish one where like they throw his luggage, Renfield just like almost like don't even stop the wagon that he's gonna meet at midnight, just like off. And Dracula is the driver, but he's got like his face covered to right there. But in the American one, it's just Bela Lugosi,
It's
and I'm
Bella Lugos.
like, why? What
Like,
like
you paid for this fucking mug.
like this looks so much more creepy and just like
Yeah, but more like Dracula. Bela Lugosi is a guy that's in your dream, your nightmare that freaks you out. The other guy is a guy you don't want dating your sister. Like he's weirdly creepy,
and I don't
right?
even have a sister, but I don't want him dating my imaginary sister at
Yeah,
all.
man,
No,
that's what
that's
it is.
true because he gave off way more creeper vibes, especially
Mhm.
towards Lucia's character.
Yeah,
Whereas, like, is all the men in the room watching this?
Like
Like,
literally, that's how it
is
felt the
none of
whole
them
time.
realizing that, hey, I'm literally fucking her right now in front of her fiance?
Well, that's what I think about. Like, that's what I didn't like about one, because like one just does not acknowledge anyone in the room ever.
Yeah.
He's just like off in the corners doing whatever it is he does,
Or,
which
like-
is just stare at a wall
Or like
for
Johnson,
so long.
or Johnson very much like engaged, and he
Yes.
had like. I think another thing is that in the English one that they don't do in the Spanish one, where in the English one he has the drive to like, no, I want to go back home,
Mhm.
but in the Spanish one, Juan doesn't have that motivation. So it's like, I think that was probably maybe one of the reasons why is like Juan didn't have a motivation to like, why is there a sense of urgency to leave, where John read the fucking room and knew he had to get the fuck out.
Right. No. What was I going to ask about next? Because we were doing such a good job. I lost my train of thought.
it's a
Alright.
really good thing to have two movies together like that
While
you can talk
while you
about.
think about that, I'm gonna say my favorite character, hands down, in the Spanish version was the dude that went crazy. Forgot the name right now.
Renfield.
He had so much range, like so much range. He was able to showcase it in this movie, and I loved it.
He committed, man. He did. That guy was committed to his role.
A lot more sassier in the Spanish version than the English one.
Well, and he's able to play with. That's why I said like the Spanish Renfield, when he's still preppy, was very bland to me. But once he goes cuckoo, like I was like, oh yeah. Because then he tries to have like, and maybe that's because it's longer in the Spanish one. So there's more of a scene when they're interviewing Renfield, about like his schooling and everything. And it's not until he sees the fly that he gets distracted and starts to kind of. Whereas in English, in the American one, they kind of just like speed through that. But in the Spanish one, they actually have time to just have him staring at the wall and lose himself. And of course, there's a lot of close ups of people like, we're staring at Renfield. Renfield is staring at a fly, and we're supposed to be staring, but we've got our eyes looking at whatever direction. But it definitely builds up his character more of just like, all right, I can try and be calm. I can try and focus and play with them to where I'm smarter than them. And in the American one, because it was shorter, It just doesn't have that same effect with Renfield's character.
Also, like with in the Spanish one, you believe that he's in the insane asylum because in the Spanish one he's hiding from them. He gets caught, and that's how he gets in the scene. But in the English one, it's like, y'all talking about the plot? Y'all talking about the plot?
What's my line?
Yeah. Well, that is just like the Spanish Reinfeld actually makes me feel sorry for him. Too.
Yeah, because he's so
there's that
pathetic.
aspect of it where like you realize that this is something that was done to him, and like even though he is participating, you can also see that there's that like shred of humanity left that just he's trying to either smother or like then he'll like cling to it so desperately,
Yeah.
Whereas like the American one, he says that in words, but I
don't believe him.
No,
he comes off like
not at all.
that cringy incel that's like, I didn't mean to shoot those people. They
So-
just died.
For the bilinguals here, what I don't know if you guys felt this same thing, but in English it's master, and in Spanish it's maestro, which is the same thing, but also is another word for teacher. So like in Spanish, a maestro is a teacher, not just master, right? So I don't know if that, to me, I also kind of enjoy, like, oh, okay, like it's not just my master, but it's like my teacher. Like I look up to Dracula, not I'm just like I want to please him, or I'm just a drone. It's almost like I want to be part of something bigger. I want to, like you promised me all these kind of things. So I feel like I don't know if that's a language thing as well, or just they spent more time focusing on it. I can't quite remember the actual story or the book of more of the relationship of Renfield and Dracula.
and that actually adds like so much more to it too, because like that kind of does make sense why you feel for him more, because he sees this as something to work towards, but we know that Dracula's lying, like so that adds that like aspect to it. That's actually really profound and interesting.
Yeah.
If I do say so myself. Did anybody else have like a character preference that like they specifically wanted to talk about that we haven't covered yet, or anything to add to this?
I just think that basically Dracula, Bela Lugosi put into the other movie is really interesting, because I think there's so many better acting jobs in the Spanish version. But again, I got different kind of creepy vibes that were not as horror based from the one from the Spanish Dracula as I did from Bela Lugosi. Dude, it must be
creepy.
so hard to stand up to him, especially too. Like when you put the two next to each other, it's not even close. It's really not. It's so different.
Spanish Dracula is just the creepy Spanish drunk at like
It's
3
a guy
in
with
the
slick
morning
back
at,
hair. Like that's like it didn't have that same feel.
Plus, I'm sure the Spanish one, they go all ham and they like stretch out the mental battle between Helsing and Dracula. I would have loved to see Lugosi's take on that, because the fight in the English one was pretty damn quick and very one-sided. Like Helsing is like, oh, I'm no match, I got God, Where
So
the
the Spanish Dracula also, to me, like he was more smiling than like Bela Lugosi. It was more of like, show me your fangs, and it's like, oh, we don't have fangs because Bela, like, that's their insert and prop. Like,
dude, remember he kissed the girl's hands. He kissed the women's hands too.
Yeah, he's just creepy.
Yeah.
Smile.
Have you ever been anywhere where someone kissed someone's hand and you weren't completely creeped out? Like that's a weird thing to do for real. Like I mean, if you're like, I don't know.
In the Spanish version, I remember when he got invited to like that theater spot and he's like kissing the hands. I thought because of the rule of 3, he was gonna kiss the dude's hand.
Oh no. Different. I mean, although Dracula, they do make kind of asexual a lot, or just that he he goes always. If you got blood and veins, like he'll suck you. So I guess it would make sense, but
And yeah, and you mentioning that too. I thought again, not being very familiar with Dracula. I thought Dracula was just also like a creepy dude in the castle the whole time. I didn't know he was like out and about, like he was going to theaters. He was out here.
so that's a thing that
He's riding around in carriages.
they don't
Has
bother
the Uber.
in the in the Spanish one. He's just at the theater. They don't bother showing him already stalking and biting ladies in the in alleys and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just going to point out that like that's kind of like such a big part of vampire mythology in general is just like the weirdly voyeuristic sexiness of it, you know, because like with Bela Lugosi, you feel that like sexual tension too, just like a little bit, like, and that's with like everybody, like everyone finds a vampire sexy and it's in his own way, you know. Whereas like I don't think that was something that they tapped into as much as they could, or like what they did tap into read off not really cool. But no, like, and it is an interesting aspect to it too, because like I do remember like the moment where he drinks from Reinfeld, how like weirdly charged that moment was, you know, like, or is that just me reading into it? Because like I honestly think that Bela Lugosi just does have that like sex thing to him that adds to his performance in a way.
The Spanish one is just sleazier almost, like, right?
Yeah, I would not bang the Spanish Dracula.
It's just like a paper cut, right? Or the staple got me because he's like, kind of doing like a weird, face, and then it's the little cross came, and I'm like, so how did they get past that? If he has a cross, is it just like, I'm not gonna come by your neck, but I could like bite you in the arm and it would be fine? Like, how do the lady vampiresses, are they able to get to the cross without a problem, or does one of them have to take it and die and then they can, like, that was my, I guess, vampire lore, Dracula lore, that I wasn't quite fully
I think the movie just forgot.
Just like a quick coma. Here's one point that I was like, yeah, you can take these asshole ways. I don't care about them. Was when like the lady was like, I think she already like turned or was turning into a vampire, and she calls the maid, and she's like, hey, can you like get out that weird flower thing out of here, and can you please open the window? I'm like, you can't open a fucking window. Like, you have to call people to open windows for you. Oh,
She's
chill.
more uppity.
Well, she was sick. Also, oh wait, but Dracula also got in touch with a nurse, right? Because that was
Yeah.
a thing. The doctor was like, "Don't do all of these things," and then she was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do all the things that I'm not supposed to do." So
Yeah. No,
So how about rules? Like rules that are established in this movie that are like vampire rules nowadays, right? So one of them is like Renfield. Did he ever actually? He never became a vampire, right? Like he was on the road.
yeah,
Because dude, throwing him off the thing and rolling down some stairs should not have killed him if he had any sense of immortality.
he's just a groupie.
Yeah.
He was in the process, right? Because he had been bit.
I
We
think
never see him get bit.
Well, that's what I was going to say too.
like they specify in the film that what turns her into a vampire is the fact that he opened his own vein and had him from him.
So that's the rule I was going to say that comes up later on in other movies for sure.
So
I think
I think it was something that he kept promising Reinfeld.
Yeah.
But never.
I mean, that's the lore nowadays, right? Of the servant to the vampires are like, you're promised But one of the Renfields was like, I don't want to, and then maybe it was a Spanish one. It seemed like I don't want to kill or I don't want to bite people's blood. Like that to me is too much. Like I'm cool
Yeah.
with bugs. Did I
I
mishear
think,
that or misread that?
but it's in both of them, I believe. But because and in the Spanish one they have that extra scene with him eating the fly, like it's much more prominent in the Spanish one because he does it twice in the Spanish one, and in the English one they cut it. They cut it in the second time when he was going to do it. They cut it right before he does it because it's when he goes up to the nurse. In the Spanish one it's played off as a laugh type thing. He goes up to the nurse and you think, oh shit, he's gonna eat the nurse, but it wasn't because of that, because there was a fly on the nurse and the fly flew away before he could get to it. And the English one, it just cuts it right before he gets to the nurse, which is like a weird choice. It's like, well, did he get the nurse or did he not? Because we see the nurse again later in the movie, so obviously he did not. So like,
Yeah.
There is dialogue that he doesn't necessarily want to get to the level of Dracula, right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
I also think that might be another kind of sneaky thing that Dracula doesn't tell him. Like, he just tells him that the power is in the blood, and then just doesn't explain whose blood. So it's more just like, if you just eat enough animals, you'll one day be as strong as I am. Like, I think that's the lie.
Because he does feel like you said, like, he in the Spanish one, he earnestly does have regret. You know, and he says
At
it
the
like
very end, he does, yeah.
But yeah, no, like it's just very interesting, like how like the little subtle differences really just take these characters into completely different ways. Because like I also feel like the scene where Mina is talking to John was like so, I can't decide which of those, like the scene where she like bites him for the first time.
Oh no!
Like which one I liked better, because they were just played in such very different ways, you know.
In one of them, I was like, are they just waiting outside to make sure this is what's going to happen? Because they like stand in the next room and are listening, and they know she's about to bite them. And they just wait until she bites them. Then like, ah ha ha ha, like right? They like jump out. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's in both scenes, and
is it okay?
I think in the English one it kind of plays off better because like you believe that John doesn't have a set or had to like. You believe that John is trusting enough of Mina. Well, no, yeah. Mina's the best friend who ends up turning into a vampire in the beginning.
You're right.
It's Ava in the Spanish one. No, it's Lucy in the English one. Lucina in the Spanish one.
Oh, you're right.
Where was I going with this? When she bites John, you believe that John is trusting of Lucy, and so you know, and at this point in the movie, in the English one, almost everyone knows that Dracula is the baddie.
Yeah.
In the Spanish one, they're still in conflict of whether or not to believe Van Helsing. So, you know, Van Helsing's like, wait. Like, that's how I read it. It's like, no, this is the proof. And poor Juan is over his head. Like, he's so like, oh, you seem fine. You seem nice. It's like, no, it's because they're going to bite you.
Does Dracula be consulting the dude before he's gonna kill somebody? Because that dude was snitching.
Yep. Well, but nobody believed him anyway, so
yeah.
I think it kind of hints that Dracula has a telepathic connection to Reinfeld, because he does have that moment where he's behind the bars and Dracula's so far away and he's like, no, master, no, like don't go after the girl, like I promise to do better.
And that also brings up another moment that like we get in the Spanish version that we don't in the American, where like you actually see the bent bars.
Oh yeah. Like, oh shit, yeah, he did that.
Whereas in the American version, they just say it.
Yeah.
So it's much like you get more.
Yeah, they didn't show it at all. They call it like Swiss cheese or something, or like it was like bent away like cheese or something.
We bent the balls like they were Swiss cheese or something. Like, and then the Spanish one, Martin's like, Oh! Because Martin keeps on like the motherfucker keeps on running away.
One thing I thought that the studio probably had control on, JP, you were mentioning before about the studio control of the movie, is the actual biting. I felt like in both movies there was it got close a little, or like the arm went up just once, but you never like saw a mouth get on a neck. You know what I mean? Like they definitely kept away from that the whole time. And to me, that's would have been the scariest part, especially coming from Bela Lugosi, the guy leaning in that looked like that and had that much,
Well, the thing is,
control.
this was filmed during the pandemic, so they had to take this out.
Well, and I'm wondering
sorry.
that's why, like, sometimes it's weird because, like, he couldn't show his teeth.
Maybe.
Because I don't think neither of them had fangs.
Right, nobody had fangs in either movie. Yeah.
None of them had fangs, and in the Spanish one, it's the only one that they actually do show the bite marks. Because, like, in the English one, I think Lucy still has the scarf to cover the bite mark, but only in the Spanish one do they say, like, hey, why are you wearing that scarf? And they actually check to see if she has the bite marks.
Because, they even talk about it in the autopsy and stuff.
Yeah, in the auditorium when they're all watching it. They did use that place in both movies, right?
Yeah.
The auditorium.
They did.
But I think the Spanish one, they actually did get up close and personal, whereas in the English one is like, we're just going to shoot it from here.
Really far away. I agree, man. There was a lot of shots in that one that were like that. There were a lot of like shots that were really far away from the action that you're listening to. I did feel like also the houses, I believe it was in the Spanish one, were bigger. So like all the rooms were like giant that they were in the interior shots, not just the castle, but like when they were at the other people's houses. I don't remember if it was the American version or the Spanish one, but one of them, the rooms looked bigger.
So one question, that shot, because I thought it was impressive in the Spanish version. Like the shot when he's like going to the castle and you see kind of the castle far away. Do you guys know how they made that?
No.
That has to be models and forced perspective, I believe.
Yeah, because like the backdrop was a matte painting, like the actual castle that you see. And then like them going down the trail was something that they put in front of it. So it was the sound stage.
But those big ass doors, those were real.
Oh,
and
like very opinionated doors
in the
Spanish
fucking
version.
Spanish one, they took like half an hour to open those doors. And they were loud as fuck.
Oh, dude. Shout out to Young Frankenstein. They used every one of those doors. Every door creaked in that movie. It did say a lot for that movie. It really did show, like when you watch that a month after watching the other, it really did do a good job in Young Frankenstein of using the sets and making it feel like at least the scenery was very similar to what we were watching.
Oh my God. Sorry, because we were talking about the doors, because they were obsessed with the doors in the Spanish one. The thing that freaks out Phil in the Spanish one is that Dracula happens to have an automated door at his room. Like that's the thing that freaks him out. Where in the English one, it's kind of implied that it was the wine that did him in. But it's like the way he freaks out at the door closed. He's like, "Oh, fuck me!"
Hey, they didn't have automatic doors back in 1931. Dude, that would have been weird.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna rewatch that scene because I bet that's how in the Spanish one they play off. That's where he lost his crucifix. Because I bet when he's doing this, he's like, there goes my cross. Oh, fuck.
Dude, he had already gone through the scene with the spider webs.
Yeah.
He walked through the spider web right before that. Like, it was so weird.
In the Spanish one, I think Dracula does go through the spider webs, but in the English one, it just cuts. It cuts it.
Doesn't show
they both cut. They both cut, but they both have a cut, but it's slightly different cut. Like, there's definitely more in the Mexican one. I feel like it's smoother in the American one than the Mexican one because I was waiting, and it's more of a looking. I think you know why? Because I think it's a Renfield close up. And then when it goes back, Dracula is already past the cobwebs. So I think that's what it is.
So the movie did its job. It tricked me.
Yeah, but like I also want to bring up what Chris was talking about, like how much bigger the rooms in the Spanish one felt because they were using the same set. You know, so it just shows you how like a director's vision really does change like an entire space. You know?
Camera angles, I would imagine.
Oh, 100%. It's just like it's interesting how that like works in the story. So I thought that was also a very interesting observation. Since we are hitting, or we're 5 minutes past the hour mark, I think we need to get on to 5 minutes past the hour mark. We're getting to final thoughts. So who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go first. This movie was honestly a great introduction to Dracula for me. I'm super glad that I watched it. I'm super glad that it was in Spanish too. I didn't put subtitles on. I just straight up said, I'm gonna watch this the best way possible, and that is because I'm fluent in Spanish. Let's watch it that way. And honestly, it was a great introduction. Even though I haven't seen the original one, just based on what you guys are saying, I'm glad that my first glance to the Dracula story has been the Spanish version because I think they did a solid job. Like the only thing that took me away a little bit were those like close-up shots, just because the acting choice was so different, and it honestly made it, I guess, more comical to me in like many moments rather than scary. And maybe that's also one of the reasons I should watch the original one or the American one, uh, just because of the scary factor based on what you guys are saying. But overall, great movie. I would recommend anybody that likes classic films, that likes films overall, and that likes monster movies.
Mm-hmm. All right. Who's up next?
I'll go. I enjoyed it. Who would I recommend it to? Like the Spanish too, I would recommend it to someone I think like Michaela. You know, that is like a horror fanatic and might be interested if they had never heard of like this other Dracula movie filmed at the same time on the same day but different time of day. So I think I would be one of those, or yeah, so more of like someone interested in horror and stuff like that, or really big into Dracula or monsters movies from that time period that might have not seen the Spanish one yet. But other than that, I don't know who I'd be like. You know what you're missing? Dracula en español. I just don't. I just don't see why I would recommend it. But it's a good movie. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed both of them. Excuse me. And yeah, Renfield.
I don't think anybody's ever going to do this again. I don't think a studio would pay the money to have two films shot the same way because I don't think they would see a profit in that. And that's sad because I think it'd be really cool. Like we're so used to remakes now. Everything is remade. That's a whole thing, right? But for me, it'd be awesome if it was shot at the same time with different actors. It would be interesting. To me, this is a cool experience to watch a movie this way, and I would like to watch other movies in the same way, and not, like I said, 30 years later a remake or 5 years later nowadays, but rather like this, where they're using the same scenes and the same. That's very, very interesting to me. It's really cool to look at the differences and choices that people have made. I would definitely recommend it to film students for that exact reason, because then they could pick through and say, like, it makes sense why they did this. Why did they do this? Maybe they looked at this before making that choice. So for me, but I really thought it was really good. And I think in general, this is probably the most iconic first, well, other than Nosferatu, horror movie that people think of, like, age-wise.
Yeah, definitely. JP?
Oh man, yeah, I definitely would recommend it to horror folks, horror movie folks, cinema files and whatnot. In hindsight, because we did watch the Spanish one first, because this was supposed to be a review of the Spanish one. I probably for sure would say if you're gonna do a double feature night, go with the original Dracula. It's pretty quick, and then see the longer Spanish Dracula. Because it's funny because like I'm sure there's things in the first one because we in the order that we watched it, whereas like I wouldn't have thought twice of things that were not brought up again or things that were cut. That in the Spanish one they do decide to finish the story or like actually do show. Like it would be like one of those. Oh my gosh! Like yeah, I get it. I understand why they decided to add a creaking door for 3
Well,
hours.
I guess language wise, right? If you don't speak the Spanish, it definitely makes more sense. Like probably watch the American one because it is shorter, but it's in English, so you get if you're not super used to the story or know everything, because then you can be more relaxed watching the Spanish one. Because
Mhm.
yeah, if you are not a Spanish speaker and you have to sit through Spanish or read the subtitles, you might be too much and lose interest to watching the American one, the English one. So I would think you watch the English if you don't speak a Spanish, or maybe you speak Spanish, watch the Spanish one first and the English one second.
Ditto. Yeah, pre-game, which whatever tongue you're most familiar with.
Heyo!
And yeah, yeah, sure. Why not? Fuck it. Oh my god. A plus. A plus movie. A plus movie. That's an A with a plus. I don't think I've ever done that before.
Well, see, I'm thrilled with like that this group enjoyed both because like I knew I was kind of asking for like a bit of a chore, but I'm really glad that we were all interested in this exercise because like Chris was saying, you don't see a lot of films where you get to have that like side by side, especially since like I said, the bare bones of this project are the same, but the way that these directors decided to flush them out are two very different things. And I do think that they're two very different movies in their own way. And I'm glad to have watched something that participates in like such an interesting experiment. And it is kind of sad that I don't think we'll ever see anyone trying to do something like this again.
Well,
So
usually especially due to Hollywood, but the closest one is it's a foreign film that then they do the American one almost right away. Uh, it's a what's that European Markinson? So it's one of the I think it won the Oscar for best foreign film this past year. I didn't watch it, but it has to do with like a teacher or something, and they're drunk or whatever. But like it won the Oscar, was nominated for a few different things, and then like almost the next day, it's like they're making an American version, and so is tied to it, and it's like Markinson, that actor, also speaks English. Like, why wouldn't you like could just hire the same actor because he does speak English as well? But I don't know if they ended up like there was such a overwhelming kind of like stop, just like watch the original version. Like you don't have to Americanize every single version out there. So
well, and it's just like what's also interesting about this is since they were made at the same time, they don't have like that precedence either.
right,
So like they don't have that like influence of like, well, this seemed to be what worked really well, and what people didn't like about this one, like you don't have that
right.
already perceived welcome,
Hmm.
which is something that I don't think we're ever going to have again. So if you're really into film and you want to see like a really interesting moment in history, I think you should take a look. It's worth it, and it's really fun. It's really fun. Um, and with that, JP, do you have a question for Steve?
Yeah, I guess I do. Steve! Oh, I am Dracula. What do you have for us next week? Ooh.
Dude, you sound like wait, hold on. You sound like the old lady in Holes is up on the mountain.
Oh no!
For everything and everyone.
Eternity.
Run eternity.
Next week, I'm glad you asked, JP, and I was really interrupted by Chris because it is my turn. Yes, we are back. And I feel like this next genre that I want to explore in my turn next week has been very neglected here. And I feel it's time to make a hell of a comeback to this genre that we haven't explored so much in the cinema club. And
Hallmark
I am
movies.
gonna
Yeah,
I'm gonna
human
have
centipede.
I'm gonna have three choices for you. We start with Alrighty Then in the comedy genre.
Oh
Ace
no.
Ventura, ladies and gentlemen, is number one. Number two, What is Love? Baby, Don't Hurt Me. That is Night at the Roxbury. Or number three, Yeah, Baby, Yeah. Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me.
Right.
So number one, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
Are we watching the German version? Did you see the words?
I guess so. No, it's the English version. Night at the
Dude, are
Roxbury
we gonna watch the young Ace Ventura movie?
Don't you dare.
and Austin Powers.
Oh
Spy Who Shagged Me.
man, I don't. I have no idea. I don't have a 20 die whatever JP has
Only
that has
one
multiple
movie that
sides.
aged poorly, and you'll be surprised which one it is.
I don't know, man.
Are we voting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
you're
still
Yes,
trying to
we
figure it
are.
out. I'm trying to.
So one more time, Ace Ventura, not the Russian version. Not at the Roxbury. Austin Powers, Spy Who Shagged Me, the first one. Oh no, my bad. This is International Man of Mystery. I've been saying the wrong movie the whole time. International Man of Mystery, the first one.
All right, so it's gonna be 1, 2, and Trey, right?
That is correct.
Okay, I think I got it.
You ready? Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, it's a tie.
It's a tie
Okay.
between Ace Ventura, the German version, and Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery. Guess who's the tiebreaker? This guy.
Or
And
do you
I'm gonna
call a friend?
go.
Call
And
Jason
I'm
at
gonna.
work.
Well, Jason's not here. Too bad. Raymond's not here either. He's accepting awards. I'm gonna go with my personal favorite, Austin Powers,
Okay.
International Man of Mystery. So for
Nice.
El Dandino, Chris, Michaela, JP, and me, Steve, that's TV. We'll catch you next week. Bye bye.
It made
Bye.
me into a dog. Remember